Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze, the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about surveillance. Before we do that, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to get all of our latest content. You can see I've been posting our most recent videos, including my video about the Ukraine whistleblower, which some of you may have noticed is gone from YouTube, but if you click on the link on our website, you can see the BitChute version, so it's not lost. Also, follow us on Minds, follow us on Steemit, Discord. You can follow us on BitChute. You can support us on Patreon and support us on the Subscribe Star. And I want to remind you guys, some of you, I know at least one commenter said, I don't want to get texts, so you don't want to join the text list. But the reason I'm building this text list is because when the day comes that my YouTube channel is deleted or I'm removed from other platforms, this will be the only way, the main way for me to communicate with you guys. If you're not on my email list or you're not on my text list and you don't visit the website regularly, you might think I'm dead. But I need you to join one or the other so that we can communicate outside of social media. Also, if you want to support me, buy products through My Brave Botanicals. You can get a free ounce of kratom or check out some CBD, and that helps keep us going. So I found this other interesting poll, and I know some people have said polls are BS, or reports like this are BS. And it's true to some extent. As we talked about in our last video, CIA's disinformation campaign is complete. Looking at another poll that was taken, I mentioned that we don't necessarily always know the size of the polls or the people they polled, so it's difficult sometimes to really get at, like, is this representative of the whole population? And sometimes polls can be, sometimes they're garbage. And we also talked about, even in that same report, that data, people seem to trust data, but we know that data can be manipulated as well to serve a certain opinion or a certain viewpoint. So it's always good to be skeptical, and I encourage everybody to be skeptical of the things I put out and to think for yourself. But this one is also interesting. It says that most Americans believe they are being tracked by corporations and the government. Surprise, surprise. Looks like some people are paying attention. But let's read into this. A strong majority of Americans believe they are being spied upon and tracked by private companies and the government on a regular basis, according to a report released by Pew Research Center Friday. It's such a common condition of modern life that roughly 6 in 10 adults say they do not think it's possible to go through daily life without having data collected about them by companies or the government. The authors of this report stated, and you can see the original link right here at the Pew Research Center. And interestingly enough, they say the study echoes the type of anxiety George Orwell tried to evince upon the publication of 1984, the famed dystopian novel about a surveillance state that regiments citizens' behavior by prying into every aspect of their daily lives. Big Brother is watching you is the maxim on display in the world of the novel. In 2019, the fictional concept of Big Brother has been replaced by the real-world concept of big data. While Orwell wrote his book in the late 1940s, many of the themes brought to bear are now common features of our daily lives, according to Pew's survey of the American public. And Americans are uneasy about this intrusion. And it's interesting they say this before we go further, because I find that, honestly, in my, let's say, for example, in my mayoral campaign, in my, I've focused on technology for a long time, and in my articles and things of this sort, I find that people don't seem to care about their privacy. And that's just been my experience. Everybody's got different experiences, but for the most part, I've found that, the people, they're not really that concerned about it, it seems. And that's a little frustrating. It's overwhelming, that people think, or, you get the usual, well, if there's nothing to hide. I've heard that more than a few times. 8 in 10 respondents say the risk they face due to collection and storage of their personal data by large tech companies outweigh the benefits. Nearly 66 say the same about government collection. Yeah, but how many of these people are willing to give up Facebook or similar products? Not many is what I've found. The study says, quote, most also feel they have little or no control over how these entities use their personal information. Yes, it's called stop using them. I mean, this is the thing that's so freaking crazy to me, is that there's so many people who talk shit about Facebook, and including myself. I didn't even use Facebook for over a year, almost 2 years, until this campaign, and I decided to get involved in it because, well, I need to reach people. You can't really run a political campaign if you can't reach people, right? And that's the whole thing. Everybody's like, well, I have a business. How can I reach people if I'm not on Facebook? Everybody's on Facebook. I got to be on Facebook. And there's some truth to this. And this is how the powers that wish they were would like us to believe, that we just sort of acquiesce and say, well, everybody's on there, and if I'm going to need to reach them, then I need to be on there. So although people say they feel they're not happy about this, or they have no control over this, it's a voluntary system. You don't have to be on Facebook. You don't have to use credit cards. You don't have to use the facial recognition, at the airport. You don't have to do certain things. However, the big change that I've been talking about is with 5G, with the switch over to 5G and the smart grid and the Internet of Things. It's going to be everywhere, so you don't have a say, and that's the big change that's coming. In fact, 84% of those surveyed said they have no control over what the government can collect about them, with 81% saying the same about companies. Once the trend is broken down into components, the trend still holds. American adults feel they have no control over who can access the search terms they use while perusing the internet. That is true if you're using Google and some of the mainstream platforms. And let's even be real about it. Even if you're using Brave or you're using DuckDuckGo, unless you have a machine that's a computer that's built up from the ground up with encryption from the very beginning, not just some off-the-shelf product that probably has backdoors like Microsoft, all Windows stuff and things of that sort, then you really can't trust any of it. American adults feel they have no control over who can access their search terms. About 28% feel they are not in control over whether the government or private companies can access information about their physical location. That number is a little low. More people should realize the government is tracking your physical location, or at least has the ability to, especially if you have one of those smartphones in your pockets. And look, I've only been using smartphones for 2 years now, and I think I'm ready to just give it up. I think I've gotten the most out of what I can. I had to start using it for journalistic purposes. When I was writing for Mint Press News, they wanted me to be doing live streams from on location, and so I had to give in. But I currently don't even have a cell phone that works, so I'm kind of happy with that. This lack of control has materialized as a major concern for many of the individuals surveyed, as 79% of the adults polled said they are either very or somewhat concerned about how companies are using their data. As it relates to the government, only 64% have concerns about how it uses their data. So 79% of adults say they're either very or somewhat concerned about how companies, 79%, are using their data, but then only 64% about how the government uses it. And this is, to me, indicative of the fact that people in some circles are less trusting of the companies than they are the government, which they're both your enemy, just in case anybody in this audience hasn't quite gotten it. It's not that it's just the government or that it's just the corporations. I used to see this divide for so long, and especially when it comes to, say, progressive versus libertarian or anarchist versus, others more left-leaning, is that there's a mistrust for corporations on the left and there's a mistrust for government on the right. But it's a combination of the two. It's not just one or the other that are your enemy. It's the corporate state that is the problem. And they're becoming further and further enmeshed. But definitely in the age of big data and big tech companies, the corporations are becoming more and more powerful. But we have to remember those corporations were largely seed funded by the U.S. government. And they now are, we have Facebook employees working for the government. So it's that revolving door of corporatocracy that we've seen with Monsanto, and we've seen it with Dow Chemical, we've seen it with the big tech companies, with big wireless companies and the FCC. It happens everywhere. This is the game. American adults, where we were at, Arif Al-Khan, who is the officer of constitutional policy and policing and policy for the LA Police Department, told the crowd at a recent Heritage Foundation that concerns over private data collection versus government collection are valid. He said, quote, "The question becomes qualitatively, how much does the government know about everybody? It is certainly much less than what the private sector knows. The full scope of what the private sector knows is probably more classified than most classified information." Now, again, there's a focus on the corporations and not so much on the government. Why would they push this? Well, I think we can figure it out. But what he's saying is also true to some degree, that the private sector, so for example, if you have private companies like, say, Stratfor, Palantir, Tiger Swan, the people that were undercover at Standing Rock, you have no opportunity to get that data. There's no open records request for private companies. Let's say with if you suspect the FBI is monitoring you, or the CIA, some of these kinds of things, you can at least file open records requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. Now, they may deny you all day and say, you're not getting this, but you can at least pretend like you're going to get it. There's at least some semblance of okay, well, you can put a call out and try to find out the data, and they can at least say, no, we're not going to give this to you, or they can redact stuff. But when it comes to the private corporations, there's no law that requires them to give us anything. So I think what we're seeing is the shifting of where governmental surveillance is still there, but what they've realized is that they're actually stronger, and as this guy said, it's almost more classified than most classified information when they shift the tools over towards the private sector where the public has little access to it. Jamal Jaffer with the National Security Institute said during the same panel that U.S. laws constrain the government from collecting data because it has a lawful monopoly on the use of force. In the U.S., as a general matter, we don't think about constraining private actors in the same way because we say, look, you are free to contract the way you want to. If you decide to make a deal with Google and they give you a free email account and access to all these great search engines and you give them access to all your data, then that's on you. And that's true, but both men admitted there may not be a robust understanding in the American public about the extent to which companies gather personal information and how they leverage it once it is gathered. The Pew study found that a majority of Americans, 59%, had little to no understanding of what private companies do with the data they collect. An even greater percentage of American adults felt the same way about the government. Now, I feel like this is probably an older generation that may have been polled, and I didn't look at the specific numbers, if they only, what the age group was, but I feel like, unfortunately, so I'm 34 myself, but I definitely hang out with people in their 30s and 20s, and there is an awareness of the fact that surveillance happens and things of this sort, but there's not really a care and a concern for it. It's kind of just an acceptance of it, and I think that was part of the plan, is they get people to just kind of accept it as normal. So they're saying that most Americans don't understand that private companies take their data, but I think at least the younger generations are very aware, and they just don't seem to care. An even greater percentage of American adults, 79%, said they felt the same way about government as far as having little to no understanding of what they do with the data they collect. Part of the problem hinges on the privacy policies. While 97% of adults acknowledge that they have been asked at one time or another to approve a privacy policy, only 1 in 5 of the surveyed adults said they always or often read the policies. And let's be real, none of us read the policies. There's maybe one, and I wouldn't say 1 in 5. It's probably a lot lower than that. There's also a general lack of understanding about data privacy laws among the general public. The study says 63% of Americans say they understand very little or nothing at all about the laws and regulations that are currently in place to protect their data privacy. But a lack of concern does not necessarily translate into complacency. 3/4 of the American public say they favor more government regulation of what the private sector can do with the personal data. There is an increasing movement to pass a federal privacy law modeled on the California Consumer Privacy Act, which was signed into law last year. The law allows consumers to know what data about them is being collected, know whether it's being sold, refuse the sale of the personal data access their personal data, and demand a private business delete their personal information and be free from discrimination due to exercising privacy rights. And that doesn't sound like a horrible thing. And the European Union already passed a similar thing, giving its citizens agency over their personal information and data. And many of the adults surveyed said that such laws are necessary to hold private companies to account. And one man who was asked said, personal privacy means everything about me. Personally is private unless I personally opt in to allow it to be public. Opt-in means not by default or convoluted user agreement that circumvents the purpose of the privacy laws. So there should be some direct, clear, and simple language that explains to people what the hell they're signing up for. But we also have to take personal responsibility. I saw there was, I think Andrew Yang put it forth, saying that private companies should pay users for the data that, they're collecting. And friends were like, yeah, we should be paid for using Facebook, screw Facebook. And again, it's a voluntary relationship. You are choosing to be on there. Now, should Facebook be open about what they're collecting? Absolutely. Of course I believe that. But do you deserve to be paid for something that you're voluntarily choosing to do? I guess if the company, I'm not in support of Facebook. I'm just saying that's just this kind of mentality that you're owed something. It's a victim or entitlement mentality that you come onto somebody's platform and that they need to pay you for it. Now, if they as a business model decide we want to pay our users for the data we're collecting on them, then that's different. But I don't think the state should get involved in saying that we need to force Facebook to pay users for their data, because then you're just going to have people who are like, oh yeah, I don't care that they're collecting my data and using it. I'm getting paid. And maybe that is part of getting them to accept it in the first place. I'm not sure. I'll let you guys decide. But that's where I'm going to leave it, guys. I want to remind you that we are running the Support the Future of the Conscious Resistance Network crowdfunding campaign. Just 8 days left. I'm only doing this we did it for 14 days here in November, and we'll do another short one in December, and then that'll close out the year. But if you're enjoying my reports, if you enjoy my documentaries, if you've enjoyed my books, all I'm asking is throw in $5, $7, skip your Starbucks coffee cup for today, and throw it my way, because it's helping me do the work that you obviously enjoy, because you keep coming back for more. And so thank you for your time. Please consider investing. That's what it is. It's an investment in the future of this work and in my independent investigative journalism. Please spread this video. And let's have a conversation in the comments below. What do you think about this? Have Americans accepted surveillance? Is it normalized? Or does this study here offer some hope that people are starting to recognize the problems? You let me know what you think below. And until the next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and God damn it, you are free.